Welcome to Selling in a Time of Crisis. I'm Kent Malinowski, joined by Chet Tart. Hello, Chet.
Hey, how you doing, Ken? I'm excited about this one. The last two were mind-blowing.
Well, I'm glad you got that. And just as a quick recap, we were talking about shifting our selling strategy in this crazy time. And we spent a lot of time last time talking about the power of mental conditioning and what it is about our belief systems that determine whether or not we are comfortable and able to execute the new behaviors that have to happen to be successful in this crazy time. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today is what are the specific techniques that you can use to adjust and change your stories, change your talk track so that you can engage people in this time of crisis.
I'm excited about that. I took so many notes from the last time. I had pages of notes. And my new playbook has to do with beliefs, equal my behaviors, equal the outcome. So I'm taking notes for this one, Ken.
All right, perfect. So we're going to be more tactical today. We're going to talk about how do you change up what you say, the messaging, and how you communicate with people when you do prospecting activity. So let's start with the underlying motivators of any behavior. And I'm going to steal a page out of the playbook from the psychiatric community and talk about motivations for why anybody does anything. And I'm going to give you these 5 motivators in decreasing level of intensity. So this is how the buyer brain works. The first and most powerful motivator is people avoiding pain in the present, which means someone's in trouble now and they want out. You're seeing this play out across the country, across the world, as people modify their behaviors to avoid the risk of health from the COVID. Look at all the people that are now wearing masks that weren't doing that just a few weeks before. So we're looking at avoiding pain in the present as the highest degree of motivator. The next degree motivation down is avoiding pain in the future, which we call fear. Third is seeking pleasure in the present. We call that instant gratification, followed by seeking pleasure in the future, which is some kind of a long-term investment payoff. And the last level of motivation is interest and curiosity. Mm-hmm. So that leads us to wonder, in your value proposition, in this time that we're going through, people are afraid. Companies are doing behaviors now out of fear. What behaviors are you seeing in companies as it relates to fear? What are they doing now, Chet, that they haven't been doing before?
Well, one of the things they're doing right now is they've already cut people's salary. They've also cut people out of the workplace. They are not communicating clearly with the direction. Some of the leaders that I'm working with actually decided to step up and put some rules and regulations together, which they did not have before, and it's pushing people out of their comfort zone. So there's good and bad things. You know, what I've noticed about the fear is that fear is nothing but it controls you because it's unknown, and you can only control what you know. So I'm watching these companies and what they're doing, and now we're having a conversation thinking that this is going to last longer, and I haven't got my checks in from the government yet. I don't know if I'm going to keep the people. I don't know how to continue marketing. So this is the conversation, and you can see it festering and festering. And what it does, it's starting to anchor into their culture. So when you talk about making a phone call to somebody, you see what you're up against when you're asking them to buy something.
So let's talk about shifting the conversation from I want you to buy something to I'm going to ask you an unfair question. The unfair question is, how can I be of service? But given that you don't know me, I don't know you, I don't have the context yet for how to answer that question. So I want to help you a shift, a strategic shift from selling to helping, and then the tactical approach in how do you broach that conversation with someone. So as we talked about in the prior videos, the key to your value proposition is you have to stop selling and start helping. But it doesn't, the phrase help, that word help, doesn't have any context. So I want you to take the audience through an exercise where you can create the list of things from an emotional standpoint that they are dealing with, so you can connect with them at an emotional level. And the best way to do that is to join a conversation they've already had inside their own mind. So let's talk about the exercise. The first part of the exercise is to create a list of the weaknesses, the problems, the challenges that this crisis has exposed for your prospects, and list each of those out on a sheet of paper. And I would encourage you to make that list with things that are new to them, the new experiences, the new feelings, the new issues that have been raised and exposed as a result of this problem, this crisis. And then we'll talk about how you can adjust your value proposition to fit and address those particular weaknesses, and doing it in such a way where there is no barrier to entry. You're not selling something, you're offering something. So can you give an example, Chet, of some of the weaknesses that you have seen exposed by this crisis?
Some of the weaknesses that I've seen is, first of all, customer service has dropped some areas. Not sure how to continue the workplace. People are just not talking to one another more often in order to be close to one another. People are not buying things that they absolutely need. People are putting things off till later. So there's a list of things. Most of it's surrounded by the fear of the future. If anything
Exactly.
you said before that's powerful is they're looking at the future. At first it was this month, now it's 3 months down the road. So that's what I see them struggling with the most.
So for this exercise to be relevant for our audience in their world with their prospects and their customers, create this list. An exercise I did just a few moments ago on another coaching call is we identified the list of what's happening with the employees of the company to which my particular client services. What they service those employees. So here's a big one that came out of that conversation. The employees in the company are afraid. They're afraid for their health, and they're afraid that they're going to lose their jobs and cannot pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
Managers. Here's one of the big weaknesses that this virus has exposed. The managers don't know how to manage by remote control. They were used to managing by wandering around, and now that they don't have that ability, they're lost. They're losing that emotional connection that they have with their employees, and they're begging for help. I don't know how to do this. And in some cases, managers are not comfortable admitting that they are having this particular struggle.
And also, I'm finding out they cannot make decisions.
That's interesting.
They're frozen with decisions, and they cannot make them. They don't project the confidence. So when you don't have a leader who's projecting confidence, and you don't have somebody who can make decision, that adds more fear to your staff.
One of the things that makes people comfortable is they know what's going on. Transparency, access to information, being in the loop, those kinds of behaviors make people comfortable. And the more displaced they are, the less they feel connected. The other thing I think is going on that we identified for this particular company was that the people are feeling disconnected socially. And some of the people with the disc factor of the high I, they need that human connection. They need that constant connection with other human being verbally. If they don't get that, they're starved for it, and it's affecting their energy levels.
I have a high D I work with, Kent, and he's expecting people to come in the office. He's expecting people to work, and he's expecting people not to leave early. And
Not practicing high EQ in terms of
no.
awareness of other people's emotions.
And he's always presented himself as the most caring manager that walked the face of the earth. But he has this philosophy is that if you're not in, you're not working. Interesting.
That's got to be stressful on the people, because they're conflicted. They're being told two things: stay at home, but if you're at home, therefore you're not working. Right. So that's got to be a tough play.
So we have to go in with those thoughts in mind. All this is happening, and you're right. You got to make a list. You just can't guess it.
And once you have the list, then the next step is what can you offer? What can your company offer to help that's free, that you're not charging for? It could be free products. It could be access to things. It could be expertise. I'll give you an example of the things that we're doing. We have changed our value proposition here at the company. We're offering free wargaming scenarios for the CEOs that we work with. What I mean by wargaming scenario, we're helping them think through the next 5 or 6 moves. What happens if? What happens if the economy is in lockdown for months, not weeks? What happens if your customers freeze their budgets? What happens if the customers, when their employees come back to work, what happens if they're suffering from PTSD? There's a way to game out a lot of these scenarios and put a playbook together. What you're finding now, Chet, is the companies that have gamed out these scenarios prior to, those are the ones that will be successful and thrive in this kind of environment because they've gamed it out. What do you think?
Well, I got to tell you, there's very few that have. So this is very valuable.
So by giving folks free access to the coaching sessions that we've recorded in the past and giving them access to the Next Normal Sales Playbook, those are the things that we can do. We normally would have charged for that, but this is the offer to help people in the interim, because we know that if we can be of service, then when the things get back to the next normal, we will be remembered when they are ready and able and need the kind of help that we will provide. That's the approach of the strategy shift from being of a sales mind to being of service mind.
So the first one is free gaming.
Free wargaming scenarios. Those are phone call sessions that you, me, others will do with these CEOs. Whether they're clients or not is immaterial. And we'll
coaching.
Provide that coaching. The virtual coaching that we have already in. Yeah. And then the last is the playbook. As we evolve this playbook, we'll give people access to it so they can access it and make it come alive for them.
That's powerful stuff. Thank you.
So let's talk about intent tactically. If your intent is to help versus to sell, then it's got to have the correct context around it. And what I mean by stopping selling is the tactic of using negative pressure on people. So I'll give you an example. Instead of saying, we have this free offer, it's great and it's wonderful, and I'm sure you're going to want to take advantage of it, I call that positive pressure. Positive pressure is wrong-headed now, simply because it comes from a place of wrong intent. If your intent is to help people and find out whether or not they even need the help, then the negative pressure statement sounds something like this. We have an offer for something that's free that you may or may not be able to take advantage of. And if you can, we'll offer it to you. And if you can't, that's fine too. My problem is I just don't know. You don't know me. I don't know you. We don't have the context for this. So would it make sense? Could I share some stories of what we're doing and how this has helped other people in similar situations? And you can tell me, you can decide if it makes sense to continue the conversation.
That is powerful stuff. No one does that. You'll stand out. You'll be different. I don't know if you see this, but I see it constantly. By the way, we'll give you 3 months free, but we need your credit card up front, and then we'll bill you month after month after month. Your presentation was just relieving. I could feel the pressure coming off my shoulders. It changed everything.
And if I come from the mindset of my job is to, in sales, is not to sell you something, my job is to disqualify people that don't need our help. And if that's my intent, to disqualify, then I can say things like, I'm not sure I can help you. I've got an unfair question and I'm not going to ask it. It's how may I be of service? Allow me to answer that or ask that question at the end of the conversation so you've got proper context.
Mm-hmm.
Can we have a conversation first? And then you have to be prepared to reverse objections that people come up with and do it in such a way as you're meeting them where they are, as opposed to arm wrestling them and trying to counter or handle the objection. The approach is not to arm wrestle with people. It's, and we'll talk about this next time, it's how to agree in principle and through the tactics of nurturing and adult-adult conversations, eliminate the objections up front. And that's the topic of our next video.
And just remember, everything we talked about requires preparation and practice. That's why we're offering the coaching part of this deal. Thank you, Kent.
Thank you, Chet.